What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. Um, guess you guys pretty much figured out who's number one. LeBron James. Last time I did this, might have been 6 or 7 years ago. I had LeBron James at number three. All right, so I've pushed him up to number one, and I gotta be honest with you. I know a lot of people are gonna make look. At the end of the day, I don't understand how you can't at least understand why I have him at number one. Look, his longevity. This is a guy that going into his 18th season, even though I am seeing signs of slippage, he's still a top player in the league. Um, his team is favored to win a championship. He's already won 4 NBA championships. He's had 10 finals appearances, which is by far the most by any active player in the league. Um, he scored over 34,000 points, I believe. He's probably going to become the all-time leading scorer, which, aside from Karl Malone, no other player really seemed realistically capable of doing that. Michael Jordan, had he not retired as much, probably could have done it and obliterated it, but he retired so much. Other than Jordan and Karl Malone, really nobody was realistically going to challenge that. Even Kobe, I think the year he wasn't probably going to do it even without the Achilles injury because the earlier years of him being a guy coming off the bench hurt his productivity early on. So LeBron's going to be probably the all-time leading scorer. He's probably going to be top 10 in assists. Um, he's probably going to register well over 2,000 steals. So he's probably going to be top 10, maybe in that area before everything's said and done. Um, he's probably going to be top 30 in rebounding. He's going to be the only person with 30,000 points, over 10,000 assists, and 10,000 rebounds. And the thing that really puts him over the top will be his unparalleled level of dominance. Kobe Bryant played at a high level until his 17th season. LeBron is entering his 18th season, and I believe he's averaging around 25 points a game. Or was it 24 points a game? Somewhere in that range. So he's still playing at a very high level. Um, we haven't seen this really before. Okay. Um, Even in his finals losses, which people tend to use to discount him, he's had some very memorable performances. All right. Um, he's unstoppable. Um, he's averaged triple doubles in some finals. Now he's lost them, but individually, he was remarkable. In 2015, the one year where he lost the finals and he got universally praised, I mean, he put up staggering numbers, especially considering that his two main guys were done. And LeBron didn't give up, and even without Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love, he had that team up 2 games to 1 before he just pretty much ran out of gas. Okay, so people have to, even though some people may not like him, and I understand, he's a polarizing figure. I get it. He's political, so that's going to make him polarizing. Um, but when you combine his dominance in the basketball world and you look at, you know, how he has become more and more outspoken and on the social front, I don't see how you really can't come to this conclusion that he's the greatest small forward in the history of the game. All right, um, at least that. So LeBron James was born in 1984. Um, his mother name was Gloria James, of course, and I think from what I've read, LeBron James was just a guy who was just blessed genetically. Okay, from a very very young age, he stood out, in the game of basketball. The first time I remember reading his name, if memory serves me correctly, it was in Slam magazine in 1998. And I remember reading an article about an up and coming eighth grader who some people were saying was the best middle schooler in the country and one of the best middle schoolers they've ever seen, if not the best middle school player they've ever seen, LeBron James. And I remember seeing a picture of him. There was a kid with a big ass fucking afro. This is well before the days of male pattern baldness for Mr. James. You know, remember back then, Ira Iverson had popularized the blowout afro and shit. So I saw this kid. I'm like, I wonder if he's for real. You know what I'm saying? A lot of these guys were hyped up. Really weren't what people made him out to be. But he was the exception to the rule. Um, I remember when ESPN was airing his high school games, right? Um, and I was watching him play, and I liked his game. It was different. At that time, it was becoming more popular to be, sort of an ISO player, okay? Which in some ways kind of hurt the NBA because only but so many people should play like that, like Jordan. You know what I'm saying? LeBron was a different type of player. LeBron, his game was more akin to an Oscar Robertson, maybe some comparisons to, uh, you know, Magic Johnson. But the perfect guy to compare him to was Oscar, really, from a historical standpoint. It's only the last 10 years that it's become about Jordan. That's just some media manufactured bullshit, okay? But I remember watching him in those high school games, and I was thinking to myself, that this guy's really this is not a bust. Okay, you can just watch with the eye test. This guy's going to be a great player. When I watched him in that McDonald's All American game, I can't remember what year it was. It might have been late 2002 or early 2003. But I watched him in that game against the other high schoolers, and I could tell immediately that this guy was going to be great, 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 great. He made everybody else on the court. It looked like an established NBA player playing against a bunch of high schoolers, you know. And I said to myself, this guy's going to be phenomenal. And little did I know he was going to exceed the already very high expectations people had of him at that time. And some people, resented all the attention that he was getting then. Some people thought that, should a player who hasn't played one NBA game, 1 minute, get all this praise, all this adulation. I remember him signing, what was it, a $90 million contract with Nike at the time. Hadn't played an NBA game yet, so it was a lot of envy going on in the NBA. Let's be honest, there was a lot of envious players in the NBA. And when he was selected, first, obviously, the NBA draft with the Cleveland Cavaliers, hometown team, there were many people who speculated that this was going to be a task that was too tall for LeBron. Cleveland had not been a great franchise, except for the stint in the late 80s and 90s with Brad Daugherty and Mark Price and that team. They really have been a terrible franchise. Could LeBron James turn this team around? So he got there his rookie year, and he played exceptionally well. Now, some people can question whether or not the Rookie of the Year award should have went to Carmelo Anthony, but it went to LeBron James. Okay, and and you did see improvement with the team. Now, the first couple of years, they didn't make the playoffs, but you could see an energy there with Cleveland fans that wasn't there before, and you knew which was going to be a matter of time until they would start being a more winning team. Also, I want to mention this: LeBron James. Just want to mention this right quick in the whole AI thing. They were just going back and forth, right? The arrival of LeBron James, the acquisition of Jason Kidd to the Nets, right? Um, and the construction of the Detroit Pistons all helped to derail that Sixer team from dominance in the Eastern Conference. That should be mentioned too. Okay, those are some other things that went against Allen Iverson from having more success in the postseason. You know, also that Pacers team. All these teams improved tremendously, while AI had guys like George Lynch and maybe Roger Bell and who else? Matt Geiger, Aaron McKee. Not to slight them, they were decent role players, good defensive players, many of them. But scoring, no, that wasn't their forte. Um, so that's why Allen Iverson had to shoot the ball as much as he did. Okay, he just had to. So I just wanted to mention that right quick. Going back to LeBron James, I think it was his third year that they finally made the playoffs. I believe they vanquished the Washington Wizards at that time, and that's when you really saw, okay, this is an up and coming team. Maybe in a couple of years they're gonna be able to do what they do. But it was 2006, 2007 surprised everybody, and that's the year that put LeBron James on the map. I think they went 50 and 32 that year, which was shocking. A lot of people were surprised that they won that many games that quickly. I think the year before they went like 44 and 38 or something like that. So they get out in the first round. Okay. In the first round, I believe they played the Washington Wizards again. Larry Hughes was big in that series, a former Wizard himself. In the semifinals, um, who did they play in the semis? It might have been the Pacers. It may have been the Pacers, or was it the Nets? I think it was the Nets. I believe they played the Nets in the second round, who were just coming out of their little run as a top team in the Eastern Conference. And of course, in the Eastern Conference Finals, they were playing against the favorite Detroit Pistons. Detroit was favored to go to the NBA Finals that year. And if they did, they would have played the San Antonio Spurs. And that would have been a rematch of the 2005 Finals. Little did they know LeBron James had a trick up his sleeve. Now, I want to be known. I did a video about this. It was not just LeBron James doing everything. There was many games in that playoff run where LeBron James did not shoot the ball very well. A lot of that had to do with the fact that that was a different NBA. That was an NBA where you still had pretty good defensive players in the league, even though they were phasing out physicality. Even though at that time they had phased out hand checking. You still had a play style that was slower. You still had guys that could play defense. Um, you know, and the pace was different. You know, you had many games. The final score was 83-79, 85-80. You know, and because it was still a league where there was some defense resistance, LeBron wasn't as good an outside shooter as he became later on. There were many games LeBron did not shoot the ball particularly well. But everybody kind of remembers that Game 5 48-point performance, which was big. And it was a legendary coming out party for him. But it was other guys in that team that stepped up too. There were times when Larry Hughes had a big game. There were times when So Julius Gauskis would have a really good game. There were times where Drew Gooden would have a dominant rebounding performance and would score at times. There were times when Boobie Gibson was huge for them. So I just want to mention that. So they get past the Detroit Pistons and they go to the NBA Finals. They play against probably the best Spurs team of that entire Tim Duncan run. Um, wasn't just Tim Duncan, you know, Manu Ginobili was in his prime. Tony Parker was in his prime. Bruce Bowen was in his prime. The other guys was on that team. They were all in their primes and playing their roles magnificently. And they pretty much just stopped LeBron James and dared anybody else to do anything. Now, that did hurt because even though he didn't play with guys that were bums, he didn't play with guys who were great at creating their own shots. So, they were swept. So, the next couple of years, Kobe Bryant and the Lakers would become dominant in the Western Conference. The expectations and the push was that it was going to be a Kobe versus LeBron finals. It didn't quite happen. This is when you started seeing more criticisms of LeBron by the media. And in particular, that was the rise of Skip Bayless and that ilk. Okay. And that's when I started making videos because at that time I'm becoming more vocal because I thought it was very unfair the criticism that he was getting because he hadn't won a championship. I was saying, look, LeBron, doesn't really have the quite the cast. He doesn't have quite the talent around him that some other teams have. Although I thought that argument became very perverse over time, like as if he didn't have any help around him. Um, but he was carrying a franchise. Um, you know, but it was the arrival of that Boston Celtic team that kind of derailed him. Um, you know, but he just couldn't get it done. Okay, he couldn't get it done. And there was a lot of pressure on him to win. So ultimately, when his contract was up in 2010, he decided to go to Miami, and that's when I noticed a distinct change in how the media covered him. Before that, he was the golden boy. He could do no wrong. For the most part, everybody loved LeBron James outside of a Skip Bayless who might say something, but most people disliked Skip Bayless because of that. People forget that. A lot of people didn't like Skip Bayless because they were like, man, he's being unfair. But once LeBron went to Miami and the entire Cleveland Cavalier fan base turned on him, a lot of NBA fans turned on him. You never seen a guy do that before, which was leave your team in your prime to go play for another team, a player of his caliber. You hadn't seen that before. Some people perceive that as chicken. You know, I did. I didn't say anything about it really at the time, like I would now, but I thought it was chicken or chickenish. But LeBron did what he thought was best. But when he came to the finals the next year and laid an egg, that's when you really saw the negative criticism. That this is a guy, and that's when that narrative started. That this is a guy that, as great as he is during the regular season, and as great as he is during 45 minutes of the game, in pressure situations he choked, and that's when that narrative began. And I have to be honest with you, there are many times during that Miami Heat playoff run, that whole run, where he played into that narrative. LeBron could have a magnificent game for 45, 46 minutes. He could have 34 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, uh, playing very well. But then he would make questionable decisions down the stretch of games, whether it's all of a sudden he's becoming passive, not shooting the ball, passing to guys who hadn't really touched the basketball all game, and yelling at them because they didn't make the one shot they took the whole game. You know what I'm saying? Things of that nature. He would do these things that just seemed uncharacteristic of a player who was supposed to be compared to some of the all-time greats. Why aren't you dominating in certain stretches of the games? And that's when I finally became a little bit more vocal and criticized LeBron. But then magically, I went from being seen as a LeBron lover to a LeBron hater. But that's how that works. But he was able to win two NBA championships during that time period. After their loss in 2014 to the Spurs, at that time you could see Wade was starting to get older. LeBron's contract was up. He went back to the city of Cleveland. In Cleveland, you had Kyrie Irving. Okay, Cleveland had an absurd number of number one draft picks to the point where many people thought the draft was fixed. I'm one of them. But one of those draft picks did pan out in Kyrie Irving. Although Kyrie Irving was individually brilliant, it wasn't translating to victories. Okay, LeBron James gets there. They win 50 games, and I believe they jettisoned at the time Andrew Wiggins, which was a smart move. They took in Kevin Love, a hard adjustment for him, the same adjustment that Chris Bosh had to make, where you go from being a post player to basically being um, a stretch big, and you know it's a big adjustment playing off the ball like that when you were once the most dominant guy in the offense the team you were on prior. People forget Kevin Love was a guy putting up 26 points and 13 and 14 rebounds with the Timberwolves. Now all of a sudden you're the third option on a potential championship team while you're still a young guy. So that was a big adjustment for Kevin Love. Um, the first year they go to the finals. Unfortunately, Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving do get hurt. LeBron James was able to battle the Golden State Warriors, who all of a sudden now were a huge force in the NBA. He battled them to 6 games, but they came up short. The next year, a healthier Cavalier team go up against a Warrior team that seemed unbeatable, 73-9. This is the team that most people bring up all the time when they have their discussions about whether he's the GOAT or not. Um, Even though Draymond Green, who's playing his best basketball at that time, didn't play in Game 5, and then Bogert, um, who had a crucial role in that team, didn't play the last couple of games. That helped to sway some of the momentum of that series, shifted it, and Cleveland was able to win the championship, their only championship, the first championship in pro sports history for 52 years of Cleveland at the time. And I believe it was LeBron's sweetest championship. Last couple of years, he gets to the finals, but by that time, Golden State had acquired superstar Kevin Durant, and you know they lost. It wasn't particularly close, and many people count that against his legacy. But I mean, I'll say this before, I'll say it again. It's kind of hard to beat a team where you have three certified Hall of Famers. Okay, it's when I say certified, I mean Durant is going to be, I think, when everything's said and done, probably a top 10 all-time player. Okay, Clay's going to be top 50. Curry's going to be top 50. So it's you have the greatest shooting team trio ever. I mean, it's kind of difficult, man, in an era that's so conducive to shooting to be a team like that. Even though Cleveland averaged 115 points a game, 114 points a game in some of those contests, Golden State was averaging 125, 126. So it's difficult to be a team at their own game. Um, LeBron James went to the Lakers. It didn't. The expectations were very high at first. I remember thinking to myself, look, it'll be just nice if this team gets to the first round. Um, Initially, people had low expectations Then all of a sudden it became, oh, this team can go to the finals, which I thought was ridiculous. Um, it wasn't a good season for LeBron. He suffered the first major injury of his career, that groin injury. He wound up missing, I think, something like 27 games that year. I think it was 27 altogether. I think it was 27. And in the games that he played, the Lakers only were something like 29 and what was it, 28 and 27. So, and after the injury, he looked gimpy, he looked slow, he didn't look like himself. And there were speculation that maybe, his best days were over. But then the Lakers acquired Anthony Davis, of course, and they had their run during a very tumultuous year, okay, which was a very challenging year, not just for NBA players, but for the league in general. All right. They came back, the league, came back in the bubble after the suspension for several months, and they were able to win the championship. Okay. You can talk about the competition, but the point remains that they won a championship. All right. So when you look at LeBron James and his resume, I mean, it's the same. Okay. Um, he's a four-time NBA champion. He's a four-time NBA Finals MVP. Four-time, uh, four-time league MVP. The only players to win more MVPs than him are Bill Russell and Michael Jordan and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He's a 16-time NBA All-Star. I believe the only players with more All-Star appearances that I can think of are Kareem, Kobe, and I think Karl Malone. I think. All right. Three-time NBA All-Star Game MVP. I might be wrong about that one. Three-time NBA All-Star Game MVP. 13-time All-NBA First Team. Two-time All-NBA Second Team. All-NBA Third Team in 2019. Five-time NBA All-Defensive First Team. And that was that stretch when he was playing in Miami for the most part, when he was at the peak of his powers. This is when Pat Riley, really had LeBron James playing at a very high level on the defensive end. Since then, LeBron James has leveled off defensively. He can still give you effort in stretches, but he's not quite the same player on defense that he was in Miami. NBA All Defensive Second Team 2014. He was a 2003-2004 Rookie of the Year. Of course, he was on the 2003-2004 All Rookie Team. He was a 2007-2008 NBA Scoring Champion. This past year, he led the NBA in assists, and he is in 2017, he won the J. Walter Kennedy Citizenship Award. He's won the AP Athlete of the Year a record 4 times. 3 times he was Sports Illustrated Sports Person of the Year. This past year, he's a Time Athlete of the Year. In 2012, he was the USA Basketball Male Athlete of the Year. Back in high school, he was 2-time Mr. Basketball USA. Naismith Press Player of the Year in 2003. McDonald's All-American Game MVP in 2003. So it was in 2003. Okay. 2-time Gatorade Player of the Year 2002-2003. 2-time First Team Parade All-American 2002-2003. 3-time Ohio Mr. Basketball. He won the bronze in Athens in 2004. That was that disappointing team. The redeeming team in 2008 in Beijing. He won Olympic gold. And he won Olympic gold in 2012 in London. The greatest small forward in the history of the NBA. LeBron Ramon James. And may the controversial comments begin